Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Ben Bussey. I'm a developer evangelist with Dream Factory. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give everybody a demo. I'm going to start out with some slides to kind of introduce what we're doing. We make an API platform. So it's an open source API platform for mobile app development. So at a very high level, it's a piece of software that completely automates the creation of REST APIs to pretty much any data source that you can imagine. So you install it on a server. You can install it like in a Windows server or a Linux server or Mac, or you can install it on like an infrastructure as a service like Amazon, Azure. There are a bunch of them. We support about a dozen right now. And then what it does is it kind of completely provides REST API services to your data. So you install this. It's a runtime platform. You connect to your data sources. And then we provide a number of software development kits, both for HTML5 development as well as native development. It's kind of your choice. So it's really, on the front end, is kind of up to you how you want to do it. So the paradigm for developing with Dream Factory is quite simple. As a developer, you're developing a client-side mobile application with the technology of your choice. And you're making REST API calls to Dream Factory. And Dream Factory is running in the cloud or on a server. And Dream Factory is returning JSON data back to your client application. So it does all of the heavy lifting and kind of all of the server-side code that you would normally be developing to actually implement APIs. It's actually doing all of that for you. And then secondly, it provides a whole framework for security on top of that. So you'll see in the demo, but if you can kind of visualize it as a middleware that's connecting devices on the front end to data on the back end. And the data can be in a number of different types of buckets. You've got SQL data, and we support kind of the main open source SQL data stores. We're about to support Oracle, and we'll do DB2 and some other ones as well. NoSQL, so MongoDB is a very popular one, but we support CouchDB, we support Azure Tables, DynamoDB, we'll do Cassandra, we'll do a bunch of other ones, but these are the big ones that we're supporting out of the gate now. And then files. So there's a file storage system that you can access in Dream Factory, or you can go out to S3 or other data sources that have file storage. There are various different providers, OpenStack, Rackspace, and so forth. We support a bunch of them. And then Dream Factory, the software is orchestrated, is doing a couple of key things. First, it's creating the APIs for you, and you'll see that in the demo. And then it's providing a complete kind of user management system that it gives control and security over the APIs. You can think of it as you have all of this data that you're connecting to and you need to secure it, and you need to do that in a bunch of quite granular ways typically. So we have a bunch of features oriented around that. And then on the front end, we have software development kits. So what's nice about REST APIs are stateless, right? If you understand REST, you can make calls and get JSON or XML back. Usually for mobile, it's typically JSON. So the SDKs make it really easy to actually implement your application. They expose the APIs at runtime, make it easy to get up and running. You don't have to use the APIs, but it typically makes your life a lot easier. So you can install Dream Factory on a bunch of servers I mentioned. They kind of break into sort of on-premises if you're in a data center. You can install on the cloud servers that I mentioned. You can install on VMware, AWS, Azure. You see a bunch of them up here. The other thing is platform as a service. So you're probably hearing a lot of talk, if you kind of read the press, there's companies that are doing more of a kind of a higher level, not just the low-level infrastructure. So you can install Dream Factory on things like Pivotal or IBM Bluemix or the Cloud Foundry products that Red Hat's, all Cloud Foundry, but OpenShift is another one that you can try. So trying to really provide flexibility. Take the software, deploy it, and move it wherever you want. And then in terms of the connections, we support a bunch of the leading vendors you'll see in the demo, but it's really your choice of NoSQL or SQL there, whichever you like. And then file storage is the third. And then lastly, before we get into the demo, we have, so Puneet actually asked about some of the frameworks. And we're trying to support the really popular ones. So if you're doing HTML5 development, we support Sencha really, really well. AngularJS is very popular, so we have a bunch of SDKs that support Angular really well. And of course, jQuery is still extremely popular, even for mobile development. So there's a lot of options there. And if you're developing native apps, we have SDKs for that as well. Those are all on GitHub, and this is completely open source. So it's free to use. I'm going to talk about the various options. We provide support if you're doing enterprise development, and I'll talk about the different ways that you can get it in a moment. So let's hop into a demo, kind of show it off. So I'm going to kind of cover, it's a pretty short demo because I think I have about 15 or 20 minutes, and we'll leave some Q&A at the end. But I'm going to cover kind of 4 key areas of Dream Factory and how it works. So first I'm going to talk about apps. So in Dream Factory, you configure apps, and I'll go through that quickly. And then apps connect to what we call services. And when we say services, what we really mean are RESTful services. So you use Dream Factory to connect to the data. If you're an enterprise, you have tons of different data sources, and you set up these services, and then we provide the REST APIs for those services. That's the second thing. The third thing is I'm going to kind of touch a little bit on security and how you can lock those, once you have those APIs set up, how do you actually lock and secure that data down in a way that's kind of easy to understand but very, very robust. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about some of the server-side capabilities. So I'm going to talk about server-side scripting and webhooks and these kinds of features, kind of cloud code, or there's different words for it, but really running kind of JavaScript on the server and doing that is kind of an important area. So what you're looking at is the Dream Factory admin console. So you've installed Dream Factory. I should point out that you can get it on our website, dreamfactory.com, and you can sign up for a free account. That's the best way to kind of start using it. And once you're in there, you set up applications. So applications they can be everything. You have a couple different options. An application can be running inside the server, like if you're developing a web application, it's running on the server. That's one option. So here I can look at this very simple to-do list application, which is a simple to-do list written with Angular. This is running inside of Dream Factory. And then I can open up these files, and I can actually code in the browser if I want, or I could develop locally and upload these files if I wanted to. So there's different ways to kind of set all that up. But when we're talking about mobile development, generally speaking, you might be doing a responsive web application, so you have your binary stored in here. But you might actually be doing more like a native development model, or you're using PhoneGap, for example. And you want to build your application, and you want to point it and access REST APIs. So when you set up your applications, what it really is for that use case, the second use case, is you're providing the app name as the API key, and then you're making API calls, and that's how that all works. So when you set up an application, you decide, okay, is it going to be native? Am I going to enable cores, and it's going to access REST APIs, or am I going to host it on the server? It's kind of your choice. And then one of the key things is we have all of these different SDKs. So these are on GitHub. You can click on the different options. And what that's all about is just easily connecting to the APIs and the services that you set up. And we'll show that in a moment. There's also a quick start, which is kind of a really good way to spin up. You can follow, it's like a couple steps. It creates your application, and then it automatically provides the SDK. So you don't have to do any of the config. You can actually start making API calls from your computer right away without understanding anything. So that's a really useful feature. Now, so let's say you set up these applications. So the idea is that with Dream Factory, it's a piece of software that's connecting to whatever data you want. Okay? So it has a native database. It has a MySQL database that you can use, like if you're prototyping and you're not connecting to any database, you can use that. But typically in an enterprise scenario, you need credentials. You need to set up services. And as you saw in the slides, there are really SQL, NoSQL, file storage, and then proxying into remote web services. Like if you want to connect to Dropbox or some other web service, you can easily do that as well. It's providing all of that capability for you so that you don't have to do it. So here what I'm going to show is just in a very trivial way how you would create a new service. So if you wanted to, for example, set up a remote SQL database, you would log in here. You'd go to Services. You'd click on Create New. And you'd select Remote SQL DB. And it takes literally about 60 seconds, as long as you know your credentials, to be connected to your own SQL database. Now, where is that SQL database running? It could be running anywhere. It can be running behind a firewall. It can be running on Amazon. It can be running on your laptop. You just need the credentials to get to it. And the credentials are securely stored on the server inside of Dream Factory. So that's the key idea, is that you're putting your credentials in. You give it an API name. You give the vendor, if it's MySQL, you would select that. And then you put in your connection string and so forth, and then you're connected. So that's sort of how that works. As you see here, there are a bunch of different options. So you've got Remote SQL, NoSQL, Salesforce.com, local and remote file storage. We also provide an email service. You could add your own email service if you wanted. We're trying to cover a lot of ground there and kind of get into all of the backend data sources that you would need. So an example of the configuration, like one that's actually running, is, so here's MongoDB, a quick demo. So you can see it's a NoSQL database. I've given it an API name, MongoDB. I've given it a connection string and a database name. With Mongo, you can have different databases, of course, with different names. And then a username and a password. And once I've done that, Dream Factory kind of auto-creates this API. Normally, if you were using Mongo, you would actually write your own REST API. What we're suggesting is that APIs for SQL, NoSQL file storage are effectively well-defined. You shouldn't have to really write your own REST API. So that's kind of the key idea behind creating all of these different services. So once you've created your services, that's all well and good, but then what do you do next? So the thing before you write an application is you really want to kind of look at the API docs. And the API docs are the various methods, everything that the APIs that you've created, everything that they can do. So Dream Factory, I'll talk about users in a second. It has a full-blown user and role management system with APIs for that, so you can self-register users from your application. It has a DB API, so this is the native database, which is a MySQL database. It has APIs for every single service that you add. So here's Amazon's DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL data store. And as you look at these, you'll notice that the structure of all of the URIs is pretty much the same. So what we've done is we've virtualized the services, right? So you have like VMwares for server virtualization. We're kind of like API virtualization or REST API virtualization. We've standardized all of those APIs. And if you look at it, there's one of the things that you typically want to do before writing your app is see like, okay, well, what are all of the APIs and what do they do? So you can start interacting. We use a tool called Swagger, which is an API documentation tool. It's kind of nice. And you can just start interacting, and you can see what the REST API request looks like and then what the response looks like. So here, I'll actually go down. One thing I try to explain is people who know REST services well or learning about them often ask the question, so like, how do I query a database the same as I would with SQL? Or can I use stored procedures and that kind of thing? And the answer is, actually, you can do very sophisticated queries with REST APIs from the client. You can do parent-child relationships. You can filter. You can sort. You can limit the results. And this user interface is all about showing you how to do all of those things. And then if you need to go farther, then you can use the server-side scripting, which I'll show later. We also have stored procedure support. So if you like wrote a bunch of stored procedures that are really complex, you don't want to rewrite those. We integrate with those. So you can make an API call that calls the stored procedure with parameters and then returns the data back in JSON or XML format. So here I'll do a very trivial query. Mongo comes with a, this particular Mongo database has a collection called zip codes, which has, I don't know, a lot of records in it. So I'm not going to return all of them. But I'll do something very simple so you get the idea of what the URL request and the response looks like. And I think this has like state data, I think. Let's see if this works. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting in some parameters into the interface. And then I'm going to make a request. And this is going out to a MongoDB database that's running somewhere in Georgia, I think, on somebody's server at our office in Atlanta. So what you're seeing here is the formation of the URL request, right? You've got the URL of my DSP, which is Dream Factory Services Platform. The structure is /REST. So you can think of all of these services as a REST tree. It's a hierarchy of different REST services. The name of the API, which is MongoDB. The name of the collection, which is zip codes. And then I've appended, or the system has appended, what I put in. A filter string, which is state equals Georgia in this case. And then a limit. So the point of all this is you can actually do very sophisticated queries with APIs. And the whole point of this is to do a lot of that heavy lifting for you so that you don't have to write the REST APIs yourself. So that at a high level is the APIs. So then the question becomes, OK, that's useful. Then how do you actually secure these APIs? And the way you do that, when you're writing an application, right, you have the APIs that you've created, you have the application that you've built, and then you're using all of these services. So how do you actually secure these services? Let me just talk through it. So one thing you need to do when you're developing your application, you've got the APIs written or they're provided for you. So then how do you actually secure those? So you want to do that kind of at the table level in one case, right? You have a bunch of tables and you need to make sure that not every user can get in. So the way we do that is with roles. So here's a particular role. And the role system in Dream Factory, we're doing integration with LDAP and Active Directory and all of these other systems. You get the basic idea. But when you authenticate, you get a session token. And based on who you are, each user has a role. And the roles govern access to which applications. So here, this particular role has access to just a few applications. And here we're administering all that. Service access, and this is what I want to spend a little bit of time on just explaining. So the applications, it's decoupled. They're using services, but then you need to secure the services. So the services that show up here, remember I was showing you the APIs. All of the APIs show up here. And then, for example, let's take this database. This database has a bunch of tables in it. So here's an account table. So what I'm going to do is, based on this user's role, I can set the different CRUD permissions on that particular table. So that's kind of at a high level the table construct. Often what you want to do, though, is you want to lock down the records within a table. So we support server-side filters, we call it, which is the ability to go down and actually add kind of more advanced filters, so based on any business role. So a common one is only let users creating records read, update, and delete those records, right? That's a simple one. And so without writing source code on the server, you can do that very easily in Dream Factory. You simply, in this case, you would just, if you had a field, like owner or something like that, you would literally just put in the name of the field. The point of it is that you can actually specify the business rules at a very granular level, both for record level security and for table level security. You may want to go beyond that, and you can do things like stateful security with scripts, which I'll show in a moment. So if you have like your database state changes, this isn't an application server, it's a REST API server. So you still need to do those kinds of things on the server side, and we're enabling all of those capabilities. So that's kind of at a high level how all of that works. The last thing I should mention is lookup keys. So that's a feature where if you have, say, an Oracle database and you've already put in all of those business rules for security, you've put in different lookup keys and you have different roles, we let you inherit all of that as well. So you can actually mirror the roles in Dream Factory and then enable lookup keys. And then based on that role, all the API calls go to the database and say, oh, wait, does this person have a lookup key or not? So you've got server-side filters, server-side scripting, and lookup keys at a high level. So the fourth thing I want to cover really quickly is webhooks, scripts. So scripts are based on this notion of events. So each API, you make a request, you get a response. So every single API in Dream Factory that you set up has a pre-process and a post-process, and you can attach scripts to them. We currently support JavaScript, and we'll do PHP, Ruby, maybe other languages in the future, but JavaScript is a well-understood kind of language for both client-side and server-side implementations. So here what I'm just going to show is a very simple example. So let's say that I want to attach a script to a particular, I don't know, let's look at this DB right here. So I've got all of these DB API calls, and there's a very simple table. Let's just look at this to-do list, which I showed in the beginning. And so you'll see like all of the different methods. So these are all the actual method names for the APIs. And I could do a post process. So if I wanted to, this is a trivial kind of example, but I could make a request to do a get on a to-do item. It returns JSON back as an array of items in the list. And then I can write a JavaScript routine of arbitrary logic, whatever I want, which then manipulates that data that's coming back in JSON format, and then routes that modified return, that modified JSON back to the client application. So this is the classic use case for this is things like field validation, workflow triggers, like you have an event and you want to trigger a push notification. It's great for that. It's great for triggering things like emails, or sort of very sophisticated workflow application. The other thing is we've gone a little bit beyond that, and we've kind of said, well, it would be nice if you could write an arbitrary script. So the idea here is you can write custom scripts. So the notion there is you write some piece of logic that could do anything that you imagine, and your client application passes in whatever arguments or parameters your script needs from the client as a REST, as an API call to the platform. The script does whatever it does. In this case, it's doing something very simple. It's adding 2 numbers, which you would pass in as params in your API call, and then returning that. So this is really interesting. Like if you're doing lots of different use cases, but particularly for integration. So if like you're, for example, logging into SAP, you could write a routine that makes an API call to a URL, gets back a response like an XML. You can inject whatever the username and password is into that XML, write in the script, and then post it to a different URL, get a token back, and then use all of the APIs that you've configured with Dream Factory to then go and make calls back and forth between the client and the server. So that's the basic idea. The other thing, just quickly, just a few more minutes, we've got a lot of people ask, let me see if this one, I want to kind of lock down. We've got schema as well. So a lot of times if you're just prototyping, you want to use a database. So it comes, as I mentioned, it comes with a database, and you can add schema to that very, very easily and start prototyping. And then you can take all of this and you can export it out and move it between different cloud servers. And you can also swap out the databases. So that's the whole idea, is providing APIs and total freedom to pick what cloud you want, what database you want, and just use RESTful methods to get to your data. So that's it at a high level. A couple more things. Yeah, just a quick recap. I mean, I like to just, there's a lot in the demo, so I just like to kind of summarize what we talked about. It's an open source package. Dream Factory is an open source package for mobile app dev. It's a middleware platform for kind of any device, connecting any device to any backend server. What's good about it is it really speeds up your development time a lot, enables portability between clouds and servers, so you're not locked into any one particular cloud. You can move around very easily. And then it's got some very good security, reliability, and scalability features. And then really, I think focusing in on the hard problems that it solves is really creating the REST APIs and taking all of that you'd normally have to do manually. The client SDKs really help with your development quite a bit. The role-based table and record-level access control is really important. And then the server-side scripting, it's very simplistic to say, well, I'm going to write a mobile app, and it's not going to have any business logic on the server. So we're trying to enable all of that. There are a bunch of, so this will be shared, and I'll put this up on SlideShare. There are a bunch of different resources to get started. I guess the easiest thing is, let me just show you in 2 minutes, I think, where you would want to get started. If you want to try it, I would go to our website, and you can sign up in the upper right-hand corner. Like I said there, it's a free account, so it's hosted by us for you. Unlimited API calls. It's really like a developer sandbox to try it out. If you like it, you can, the easiest thing is to go to our partner Bitnami. So Bitnami is a company that does packages for deployments. So all of the packages for Azure and Amazon and the WAMP stack, LAMP stack, MAMP stack, all of those different stacks are all there. All of the code is on GitHub. There's a wiki on GitHub, which I strongly recommend people actually go to the blogs. So this is an index of every blog. We've done tons of tutorials for all the different frameworks. That's a good thing to look at. We have a forum that you can ask questions on. You can also just email our support team and so forth. YouTube channel with lots of screencasts that the team's done. I've done some of them to help you get started. And then we have, a lot of times people ask, well, is there product support? We have free 30-day support. You can use the forum for free all you want. And then we have different options on pricing. So if you're using this for enterprise deployments, you should buy a support package, and we'll support you through and make sure that everything works. And you can also contribute to the project, I should mention. So if anybody gets into this and they want to add, it's an open source project, please contact me directly, and you can do that. And that's my contact information. So that's it. I think we're at about 20 or 25 minutes. Any questions? Any questions? Yep.
So if I understand correctly, no code is being generated. All the codes go to Cloud Factory on base evaluation, kind of just in time.
Yes, it's all happening at runtime. Yeah, so really the core of the source code is really around the virtualization. So what we've done is we've said, look, all of the SQL data stores, we've written a layer of software that abstracts all the APIs for those, and we've done the same for NoSQL. And it's just like we're adding more and more of these. That's the core kind of thing. And then the security on top of that is also about kind of, so you don't have to write all of that security, basically. It's on the roadmap. I should mention this. So the enterprise product is coming out in Q1. So if you go and sign up for Dream Factory on the website, you'll notice it's multi-tenant. You can spawn as many DSPs as you want. It's shared. It's running, I don't know, there's probably 100,000 DSPs in there. Lots of developers are using it. The enterprise version will be your own version of that. So you put it on a server and you spawn as many DSPs as you want. It'll have Active Directory integration. That will be in the enterprise product. It will have a bunch of other pretty important features, API versioning, API reporting, DevOps-oriented things like looking at all of the API calls, which apps are being used, some basic kind of metrics there, but really focused on people who are doing deployments in enterprises. How do they get the software? How do they do it? How do they measure scalability? All that. So that's all coming down the line, but it's ready to go. And the core product is really, it's there. It's ready to use. Yeah.
Well, let's have a big round of applause for them.
Thank you. Thanks. Awesome. OK, the box. All right, I'm going to pick 2 out of here. Let's do the
Chromecast first?
Yeah, let's do the Chromecast first. Okay. All right, I'm not looking. Ready?
Hold on. Anybody pay any money?
Is it adequately shuffled up?
Okay.
All right. All right. Let's see. I'm probably going to get the pronunciation. Taya or Tia, T-I-Y-A. Bellarake? Oh. Ah. Congratulations. Enjoy.
Thank you for it, Tim.
Thanks. OK. All right, the Chromebook. Let's go. Shuffling. I got one. All right. Jenny XU. How do you say your name? Okay.
You need my ID?
I do.
Okay,
Sorry.
ID.
Here you go.
Thank you for it, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Enjoy. OK, is that it? Any other announcements, or do you have anything else to wrap up? Thank you, everyone.